Welcome to a video of opinions where I tell you what I think about things that you asked me to tell you about. Let's go. Ready to go? Alright. Anything you say, buddy. Where are we going? We're going for a drive. Yeah, we're going to talk to the people. So yes, I reached out to the kind of general community and shot you some questions saying things like, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about me, the car, my MX-5's, life? And I'll give you an opinion. Yes, this is more of an opinion than fact. I'm not a mechanic, but I'll tell you what I think about the things you've asked me. And I got about 25 questions that I think are pretty interesting. Mostly stuff about MX-5s, as you'd expect. Let's get straight to it. Oh, by the way, yes, we're going to go for a bit of a cruise while we talk, so it's a little bit more exciting. And I've got a on-site mechanic with me in case we have any issues along the way. Question the first, in no specific order, Andrew T asked, what experience do you have with or thoughts on the NC generation of MX-5s? My experience is I've driven them maybe once or twice, so not that much. Have not owned one. I think they're a little bit, perhaps a little bit bigger or heavier than I'd like for an MX-5. I like the very shrunkenness down that the NA and NB in particular have, and I think the ND is kind of a bit more going that way. But nonetheless, the NC is a very strong platform, a little bit more robust, a little bit, probably a bit more logical for a track car. Although it is heavier and therefore, you know, you're going to burn through brakes and things a bit more. There's the crossover with the RX-8 means you've got some parts and things and upgrade options there that wouldn't necessarily exist otherwise. Also, you've got perhaps some more wheel, brakes, tyre options that don't exist on the NA, NB, where we're kind of, I mean, there are bigger wheel options for these cars, but you're kind of normally restricted to a 15x9 inch rim. You're hard to get much bigger. There are bigger wheels, but nonetheless, there are some pros to the NC. Probably a slightly better general everyday road car. A little bit bigger and heavier means a little bit more comfort on the road, a little bit better road handling in terms of bumps and things. If you're, you know, in these sorts of roads that I'm in today, this car's a little bit rickety. So yeah, there are lots of pros to the NC. Number two, Ian G asks, what engine swaps have you considered previously? And he says he's planning to put a K24 NA engine with an MX-5 6-speed into his car over the next few years. And do I know anyone here in Australia who has experience with doing that sort of thing? In terms of engine swaps, the only ones that have crossed my mind is something similar, a Honda swap, where you've got that sort of higher revving, fairly powerful for a naturally aspirated engine Honda motor in an MX-5. So you sort of keep a lot of the characteristics of the MX-5 without drastically changing it. A lot of still a lot of reliability is there. And you're not going to blow away anything in the drivetrain. Most of the rest of the car will hold itself together quite happily. For me, that makes a lot of sense, but it's just the cost is quite high to source the engine and then all the bits to make it fit, custom subframes, the exhaust, making it fit with the gearbox. There's a lot of custom parts there that aren't really high volume, and so therefore the cost is quite high. So it's just not something I've ever gone down the route of. There are obviously umpteen other options. I've just never really considered them. LS, V6 options, none of them really appeal to me, or I just don't have the money and the time to consider them. So yeah, in terms of who or what I know in Australia that's done it, honestly, I know one bloke here in Melbourne that's considering doing something similar, but he's just one guy doing it at home in his garage. Other than that, I really don't have any special advice for you. I got no one that can do it for you. You'd have to reach out to some I guess, race engineering shops and see if someone is available who can do that sort of thing for you. Tilla asks, if you couldn't choose an MX-5 platform to build off, what alternatives would I consider? It's hard to say, honestly. The MX-5, it's small, it's lightweight, it's quite compelling for a track car. I think the GT86, the Toyota 86, the current generation, or the newer one, not the old one, they're a bit bigger, but they have similar characteristics. Still fairly small and lightweight, but not as small and lightweight. You've got quite a nice aftermarket parts availability, which is good. They're quite a capable, nice to drive kind of car. Maybe not as raw as the MX-5, but I can't think of anything else that would match that kind of fits the bill. There are other cars out there, maybe some Hondas, S2000, that sort of thing, but maybe they've had their time, or perhaps not quite the style of driving that I'd be looking for. So I think if I didn't have this car, if I didn't have the MX-5s, probably a Toyota 86. Next up from Epitome, he says, engine rewiring. The only thing left in my way, it's knocked my confidence and my ability isn't there. I couldn't say I would do it properly, but a video is a good place to start. I understand what you're saying, Epitome. Engine rewiring is a little bit of a daunting task. I've never done kind of a full harness build or anything like that. If you've watched channels like, I know locally here, the Skid Factory, the bloke on there, Al, I think his name is, he'll build a custom loom, or he'll pull apart an existing engine loom and then rebuild it quite a few times, and it's impressive to see it done. Certainly, I agree. If it was me personally, I'm a little bit concerned about doing it myself. I'm not an expert. I've pulled apart bits of the harness and restuck them back together, and I'm very concerned or considerate of the fact that if you got it wrong, it would be a bad situation. You could potentially have a non-running car and have no idea why, because you've pulled apart wires and not put them back together. When I have pulled apart the harness in my car, I've pulled it apart while it's still in the car and attached. I've not pulled the whole harness out, pulled it apart, and then put it back in. So I had it sort of all attached to the car, and I was doing it wire by wire, connector by connector, while everything was still attached. So I knew I was only unplugging things that didn't matter or weren't specific to the engine. Power window wiring or something. So I can trace the plug from the power window motor and the wires that come out of that, trace them back to where they terminate and cut them out from there. So I'm doing it in a safe manner. I haven't got to the point of building a full custom harness. There are better experts out there. HP Academy, I know they offer a sort of courses on this sort of thing. That might be something you'd want to consider. P Rover asks, a walkthrough or shopping list of engine management monitoring, what temp sensors I'd use, and where I install them, and why that's my preference, etc., etc., yada yada yada. None of the sensors I use are glamorous or fancy. Most of the temp sensors are GM temp sensors because the Mega Squirt ECU I run in my track MX-5 just kind of knows how to talk to those. So the engine coolant temp sensor is in the OEM location, uses the factory Mazda sensor. Oil temp is just in a block, a distribution block thing next to the oil filter. And air temp is a fairly straightforward. The air temp sensor is in the side of the intake of the exit port of the intercooler. It's an open cell GM temp sensor. I've also got two GM temp sensors in the transmission and the diff. They're new additions. They're just plugged straight into the drain ports of the trans and the diff. I've also got pressure sensors for fuel and oil. Those are generic eBay ones. I'll put a link or an image or something up on the video now so you can kind of see what they look like. They're nothing glamorous, but they do work. So in terms of those ones, plumbed into, again, the distribution block for the oil, and into a port in the fuel pressure regulator. So I run an aftermarket Raceworks fuel pressure reg, and it has a port for a sensor. Hope that helps. Dominic asks, love to see the whole car's wiring harness and how you've routed it. I'm planning on routing my rear harness, rear lights and things through the trans tunnel. So I guess I kind of covered on that earlier in terms of how I've routed it, mostly using the OEM location. So things like the fuel pump runs along the driver's side leg in the right-hand drive car, up the back and then straight to the fuel tank. So there's not really much wiring running through the trans tunnel. Even the battery, which I've moved from the boot in under the dashboard, the wiring for that, there's no wiring like a main power harness through the trans tunnel or anything anymore. Like the factory battery wiring hooks up to the power plant frame and things. So I've deleted that on my track car. Otherwise, the harness is more or less OEM, and where it's located is kind of OEM. A lot of wiring under the dash is a little bit customized. I've wrapped it with Velcro cable ties and stuff to kind of keep it tidy, but also modular if I've got to pull anything out. But yeah, I hope that helps. Rob G says, more VVT supercharged goodness. Well, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is we're in the car right now. It's got VVT. The bad news is it's got no supercharger anymore. I'll be honest with you. The local authorities reached out to my car club and they said, why have you got a supercharger on it? That doesn't seem legal. Where? Your headlights are dodgy. Everything about your car is illegal. We're taking away your registration for your vehicle. So I said, you authorities, my car is not supercharged. It's perfectly legal. It is as per the legal registration requirements and things. If you'd like to know more about that, reach out to me privately. But we're in the car, unfortunately. It's more or less standard. Jack says, I'm loving the recent explosion in regular uploads. Thank you, Jack. I upload when I can, and when I can't, I don't, if that makes sense. It's just a hobby. I do it when I can. What's that? That's a goat. Yeah, a big goat. Yeah. Can you see him? Yeah, he's through the bushes there. We've stopped again because this one's a big one. So Bjorn asks, or says, let's be honest, he's written us a little letter. Hi, my name is Bjorn. I'm from Sweden. I recently bought an NA MX-5, a 97 1.8, totally original. Had a Triumph GT6 Mark I for 34 years and sold it to buy this one owner MX-5. I would love to try and do some small mods, though I've only driven it 4,800 Swedish miles. I assume Swedish miles are the same as most other miles. Very solid car. About to change to a Nardi steering wheel. I think that's a good idea. And I've got the program that you produced on YouTube about interchangeable between NA and NB. Yes, thank you. In my car, there is a Momo wheel, ugly one, but it is a late car. Fair enough. The question, of course, he asks is if you think or know that a 3-spoked Nardi airbag wheel will fit. So Bjorn, the answer to your question is almost undoubtedly yes, it'll work. There is always a way to change the steering wheel. If your steering wheel is kind of built in with the hub attached, you may need to buy what's usually called a Boss kit, and then you'll be able to fit any aftermarket wheel. I hope that's fairly clear. We're going for a cruise, mate. Is that cool? Let's keep going. Thanks, Bjorn. I liked your story, and I liked your question. Next up from SomeDork, he says, what's your favourite faction in Supreme Commander, and how many Pepsi Maxes do you consume per day on average? Very good question. The answers are UEF and no more than one. Matt K says, an update on all your cars, plus the Lifepro batteries in the race car, and the coolant reboot, and how the Kraken is going. Well, that's a lot of questions in one. So the update is the red MX-5 has sold, so I'm now down to this NA MX-5
and my NB track car. My ND has also been sold. So just 2 MX-5s at the moment. It's the lowest number it's ever been in a very long time. I sold the red MX-5 for an upcoming project that you'll see very soon. I sold the ND because we need a bit more space. It's only a 2-seater car and the family's a bit big for that. Lifepro batteries are going well. I also had a set, well, they're actually Lifepro or lithium iron phosphate, not lithium iron polymer. So the Lifepro batteries were great. This car had a set, the track car still has a set. Unfortunately, I popped the set that were in this car, so this car is now running a new set of traditional Lipos. Yes, they popped, mate. The batteries popped. They popped because I left the bloody lights on, and doing so basically kills the battery. And how's the Kraken going? So far, so good. I did blow an exhaust gasket on it. I replaced that. That probably lasted a couple of years. Other than that, it seems to be going great. Alex G says, what's the best track-oriented mod that you've done that someone wouldn't guess immediately? Not obvious stuff like tyres, suspension. Because obviously the first thing you'd say is, well, tyres or suspension. What's a not obvious but very good mod? Difficult question. I don't know what becomes not obvious. I guess the obvious things are tyres, brakes, coilovers. They're kind of the first three you might want to go with. Maybe you could say a good seat. Having a good seat is really important for having good road handling. And I guess what goes with that is, of course, the harness. Other things you might say is a good steering wheel. For me, the factory steering wheels just don't work. They're not in the right position. And most critically, having the steering wheel further towards me, I hate most of the factory steering wheel positions in the MX-5s are too far away. And I guess that's because I'm a bit taller. So if you're a shorter person, your legs are usually shorter, your seat is closer to the wheel, and it all makes sense. For me, I like the steering wheel quite close. So almost all my cars have like an extension or a boss to bring them out. Or in my other track car, the steering wheel has quite a bit of dish. So for me, that's an important one. Other than that, I don't know. I think we'll go with that. Seating position and steering wheel are really critical for me. I like to be comfortable in the car. Johan P says, your 3 tips for every Miata driver that wants to hit the track with their car. Number 1, check all the basics, your maintenance, coolant level, oil levels, all of that stuff. Don't stuff that stuff up because it's so obvious and important, but critical as well. Number 2, tires are important. Tire pressures are important, but mostly the quality of your tires, right? If you've got a OEM, basic, boring, plastic, cheap tire, you need to drive to those conditions. If you've got a nice sticky tire, you'll know you can push it a bit more. But a rough, cheapy tire, you've got to be careful with it. And number 3, undoubtedly, yeah, crappy tires mean you crash. I've done it myself. So you got to be careful. Number 3, the number 3 tip above all else is getting practice in. And that means putting time in at the track, but also you can put time in other ways. Sim racing, driving Gran Turismo, it teaches you about how to drive a car well, where the limits are, and how to handle those limits. So it's very, very important to just put the time in to learn how to drive. Don't spend money on your car if you don't know how to do kind of even just the basics. Thanks, Johan. Jamie T says, what control arms are you using all round on the Time Attack car? Completely factory. I don't know what else to say to that question. They're all OEM. I haven't touched them in any way. I don't really see any value in using aftermarket ones. Maybe they'd be a bit lighter, but the cost is not really worth the benefit. I guess the only thing to add there is I do use Delrin bushings or bushes, the SAD Fab kit, and that's a really nice kit. So I do use that. Next one is from James. He says, how are you doing? Channel went quiet for a bit. Hopefully you've had a well-deserved break. I don't know if I've deserved the break, but anyway, thanks for all the stuff you put out though. It's great. A great resource for MX-5 owners around the world, not just us Aussies. Thank you, James. Yes, had to be quiet for a little while. I was busy doing things, just life in general. But I'm trying to, I try to make videos when I can and when I want to. If I don't want to do them, I'm not going to. It's just a hobby for me. I don't make a lot of money out of these videos, so if I'm doing them, I need to do it because I want to, and I'm glad to help others. Not everything I do is correct or a fact. Sometimes my videos are just my opinion. So, you know, if you're interested in doing anything MX-5, do your homework and don't just look at my videos, because they're not going to be the only option. Sam P, hello Sam, hope you're doing well. He has questions around strategies, driving style and tuning on how to keep an NB 6-speed gearbox alive with a turbo-built engine, torque limitation, tuning suggestions, lots of mixed info online. And look, I'm just going to add to that mixed info, because what I'm going to tell you is purely my experience. I don't have all the answers. I know Sam is building, or has built recently, a fairly powerful MX-5 engine, so he's certainly a good candidate for this. My car it's fairly straightforward. I drive it at the track, and when I say at the track, I'm not talking a drag race, I'm talking time attack style. That means I'm not really dumping clutches or putting sudden shock to the driveline, and I don't do that a lot. Don't do that ever. I don't do things like burnouts, and I run fairly sticky tires. So yeah, for me, certainly mechanical sympathy is the first one. I feel like I'm a fairly mechanically sympathetic person. I try to not rag on the car too much, but look, sometimes when the red mist hits, you do kind of push the car pretty hard. But that said, thrashing the shit out of the car, smashing gears, putting shock through the driveline isn't going to be a good thing. The second and the most important thing for me is I've limited my torque, and I think Sam's kind of touched on that. When the car was on the dyno, I said to the dyno tuner, peak torque 350 Newton meters, which is, I can't remember exactly how many foot-pounds. I'll put it on the screen here for you. But fundamentally, that's the main way that I, as far as I'm aware, to keep the gearbox together, is to just not put too much power through it. What that means is the power figure, or the curve for power, is very linear and kind of an upward curve, whereas torque will come up and then it's a very horizontal line. And so as your RPMs build, your power builds, because power is kind of a multiple of RPMs by torque, but the torque is very flat. It's just 350 Newton meters all the time, everywhere. That's how I've done it. That's what's working for me. The gearbox is holding itself together. Synchros are a little rough, but that perhaps is just age and wear more than power. Hope that helps, Sam. Thanks for your very thoughtful question. We actually got another question from Paul B, and he asks something of a similar query, although a little bit different. His query is, well, I second the transmission question. How many transmissions have you gone through, and what have you learned to keep them alive the longest? Have you had any throttle body failures? What throttle body setup do you works best, and what's the most reliable for my application? Thank you for the awesome turbo content. So Paul, the answer is I've only had one gearbox, and it's still in the car. It's the same one I've always used. I have not blown one yet. I do have a spare in the shed in case I kind of need to swap it out if and when that does happen. And I guess I've touched on the strategies on how I've kept the thing alive. It's, you know, the days are numbered, undoubtedly. We'll see how long it lasts. In terms of throttle body, when I built this engine with the turbo stuff, I added a Skunk 2 throttle body. I did the spring mod, I think that's what it's called. So Paul, I hope that kind of clarifies things. I don't know, I have heard bad stories about the Skunk. I've heard bad stories about the kind of copy, the Chinese copies of the Skunk. But for me, I've done everything I think I can to keep that thing alive and working and not falling apart. So Yee Mate says, hey mate, hope I'm not too late to ask a question. No, you're not too late, because it took me forever to get around to making this video. But it would be awesome to know some more information on your track car. what headlight blanks am I using, what sway bar setup am I using, and did I notice better cooling when I had the ducting behind the radiator out of the hood? Thanks, your channel is awesome. I appreciate the kind words. So headlight blanks I made myself. They are just fiberglass and carbon fiber. I took OEM NB2 headlights, put some cling film, glad wrap over them so that they were kind of protected, slathered on some fiberglass and some resin, and out came some very rudimentary headlight blanks. That's as simple as it was. I didn't make a mold or anything, I just slapped some carbon over the top of them. In terms of sway bar setups, the rear is completely factory, and of course I'm assuming we're talking about my NB track car. Yeah, the rear is completely factory. The front I have a full video on. I'll try and remember to post the link in the description for you, but you can find it on my channel. It is a very impressive and custom setup by HM Speed Shop. Really nice guy. He sent me a bunch of gear on that kit for free. Very kind of him, so I have to say that. But the kit, the gear is impressive. So billet aluminium parts, fully custom, really nice, and it works exceptional for me. You can kind of custom spec the torque, the tube that powers that sway bar. So, or is the sway bar, I suppose you'd say. Very NASCAR style. So yeah, really nice. And in terms of cooling, look, I don't know. I never measured really logically before and after, and the car changed so much between having the extra ducting out the hood and not having it. I still have ducting between the bumper and the rad, and I still have the duct holes in the hood. So hopefully it's all doing its job. But yeah, I never did measurements of before and after without any other changes. Isaac G says, I found an NA MX-5 for sale near me. It makes 300 horsepower and interested in buying. The seller claims it's reliable and it looks to have a lot of money spent on it, which a lot of MX-5s do. Concerned about reliability of the gearbox since it's a 5-speed. Do you have a lot of experience with the 5 speeds and making high horsepower? Are there any big things to look out for? Look, I don't. Of all my 5 speeds, they've all been factory power. I've only ever had the high power car with the 6-speed. The general consensus is the 5-speed is not as strong as the 6, and you need to be careful. As long as everything else is mechanically sound, 300 horsepower is a lot. And if the car is able to handle that, your weakest link is almost likely to be the gearbox. It's probably a factor of how long, right? How long before it no longer lasts. Motorbike. I don't have any tricks or tips on how to make it last. I guess, as I mentioned earlier, limiting torque is probably the right answer, but the limit of torque for the 5-speed is lower than the 6-speed. So it's a risk. You'll have to take that guess, or you blow the 5-speed and you replace it. They're not that expensive to source, so you can buy a second-hand one for not that much money. Good luck. Aiden asks, you've probably covered this in your videos, but what got you into Mazdas or MX-5s? Perhaps something I haven't covered is quite possible. So the answer is straightforward. I was in my early 20s and a friend invited me to like an MX-5 training day at Winton Raceway. I didn't have an MX-5 at the time, so I came in my 1985 Ford Telstar. That was what I was driving, that was my car. And it was a kind of a training day where you drive your own car at the track and you kind of learn how to drive fast. And you know, I had no experience with real on-track driving. My experience extended to Gran Turismo. So this was exciting and fun for me. The feedback I got from the people running the event was that I had, you know, good basic skills and I sort of knew what to do, but obviously I was an amateur and you know, needed some work. But the thing that kind of got me the bug was during that event, one of the owners there in an MX-5 said, hey, anyone want to come out for driving my car as a passenger? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. This guy was considered as part of the MX-5 club one of the kind of faster drivers out there. And I get in this car and he thrashes it around the track, and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. This is so fast. What sort of power has this thing got? This is insane. We get out at the end after having done a couple of laps, and I go to him, dude, how much power has this got? What is this? And he goes, dude, it's just factory. It's a mostly original car with some bits and pieces, and I was stunned. I thought the thing had so much power and was so fast, and clearly driving on track, just the exhilaration and the thrill was enough to make me even think that the car had more power than it really did. And that's it. The bug, I had it. So I went and grabbed my phone, and I was on Google searching for cars to buy. Bought myself that blue NA MX-5 that has been in some of my early videos many years ago. Craig S says, if you'd never purchased an MX-5, what would be your track car or project car? And would you ever build a front-wheel drive track car? So I touched on the 86 earlier. In terms of front-wheel drive, undoubtedly a Honda Civic or a Honda Integra. I think either of those options are very appealing, are very strong platforms, lots of power, particularly for an NA car. Yeah, a really nice option. So certainly that's the route I'd go down. Never owned one, never really driven one, so I can't say for sure, but I know that the platform is sound, and yeah, that'd be where I'd go. Next up, we get a question that says, can you explain a bit about the MX-5 oil leak issues and what part to change or maintain to prevent that? I'm not across any MX-5 significant oil leak issues, other than perhaps the main seal, front main seal, rear main seal, and perhaps the cam cover seal, cam shaft seals. That's it. They're it. The way to prevent them is to replace them. The rear main seal is the most annoying because you've got to take the gearbox off. The others are all at the front of the engine and aren't that hard to do. They are DIY jobs. I don't really have any more to tell you. It's almost always just seals that need replacing. They've gone hard, they've aged, and they need replacement. If you've replaced them and they're still leaking, they've probably been installed wrong. It's rare that there's any other issue. RD says, what do you think a first mod or things you should do when you buy one? I think I kind of touched on that earlier. Depends on what you want to do with the car, how you drive it. For a track car, perhaps coilovers, tyres. For a road car, hey, a head unit that's better than the factory one would be great. Oh, good day. But even for a road car, some good tyres make the experience much nicer. And certainly for me, even a road car, I need to change the seats. The factory seats are too high and I don't find them very supportive. Stig says, anything worth doing to the car or motor before putting it back in the car? So currently in the process of resealing a new motor. Don't do what I did. Don't forget to give it a coat of paint. Mine I put in and was like, oh duh, someone actually mentioned in a comment in a video, why didn't you paint the thing? So make sure you give it a paint job. I just went and kind of roughly hit it with some silver paint while it's in the car. So don't make that mistake. Otherwise, I'm assuming you're doing all the obvious maintenance stuff. That's it. Don't forget to paint it. Last but not least, final question is from Chris. And Chris is one of the ongoing supporters of the channel, so I really appreciate that, Chris. Only a small channel, there's only a few of you, but yeah, Patreon. So he says, what are you doing for wider tyres and for fenders to cover them? So the answer is fairly simple. In terms of what tyres do I run, Yokohama A050 225s, 225 50-15. The Yokohamas are quite wide for a 225 tyre, so they're more like a 235, 245 even. In terms of what covers them, well, they just fit in under the NB guards with just a light roll or a lip. They run a fairly wide tyre on the NB. On this NA even, 9-inch rims with a 225 tyre is possible if it's a road tyre. And then obviously on the front of the NB track car, if you haven't seen it, I've got the kind of cut front guards, or the cut fenders as you call them, and that's a fairly aggressive cut, but it means it's a good way to get more clearance. So the lip has been rolled on those as well, and then the front of those guards is actually spaced out. I've got some spaces under the front mounts where the guard mounts to, where the front bumper also mounts, and so that gives me some front clearance there. And then I've got little aluminium standoffs that just spread the guard out just a little bit to give me a little bit of extra clearance. And that's my way of getting, I don't know, 10, 20 mil, maybe not quite an inch sort of thing, of extra space in the front wheel arch, so that under load, under heavy steering, when you're really leaning on the car and the compression of the suspension is quite compressed, I don't get too much rubbing. Now I do get rubbing, usually it's mostly at the rear, not the front, but yeah, that's kind of my only solution. So I run a 15x9 rim, and it runs around a 30 offset, so a little bit wide, but not insanely drastic. I would consider something wider to see if lap time's improved, but it's kind of hard to get a wider rim and hard to get a wider tyre. So at least over here, you know, I know there are options overseas, but for me in Australia, I'm kind of limited. So yeah, that's my setup. So folks, we are almost back home. Thanks for coming along for the cruise. We went through some nice twisty roads, and I think we had a good day. It's a little bit warm today, to be honest, but the weather's been pleasant. The roads have been nice, a little bit bumpy, and I hope I've answered all your questions. If I missed any, or if you've got more, throw them down below in the comments. I reply to all of your comments. I love to hear what you have to say and why you think what I'm saying is wrong or right. And if you've got any answers to anyone's questions throughout the video that you think you could offer more information on, let me know down below. And I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to see this sort of thing again, let me know. I did a Q&A like this, I don't know, a few years back, and I thought it was quite fun. And I think this one has been fun too. Thanks very much for watching from both of us. We'll see you next time. Say bye to the camera, dude. Say bye to the camera. Good boy. See ya. Say hi to the people in this camera. You say hi to the people. Hit the camera. You say hello. You wave to them. That's the spirit.